Welcome everybody. In this tutorial series, I'm going to show you how to program in C#. It's actually a lot simpler than it sounds, but C# is a language that is actually quite powerful and quite easy to use compared to some other programming languages. C# can actually be used in a ton of different applications. In fact, Microsoft has a game programming language called XNA, which is based off of C#. So in this 1-hour tutorial series, I'm going to show you the basics of C#, and at the end of the tutorial series, you'll have a little bit of knowledge on how not only programming works, but how C# works in general. The best part is that I show you a lot of tips and tricks to help you along your way to becoming a programmer. This is a fantastic place to start if you've never coded before. If you have coded before, this tutorial series is probably not for you, but if you want to learn to code and you want to learn to code in C#, I highly recommend taking this course. I hope to see you in the course. Welcome back everybody. Alright, so let's go ahead and let's learn how to program in C#. Now, what we need to do is we need to, first of all, there's a couple things that we need before we get started. The first thing we need to do is you need to go to rextester.com and you need to go to run code, and you're just going to go ahead and push run code here. It's a free service, and you can go ahead and you can see that we already have the C# loaded. It should automatically load, and you should just have the regular settings here, and as you can see, there's a whole bunch of other ones as well. So, for the most part, this is what you need. The second thing that you should probably have is you should probably have Google Chrome, because that's what I am using, and I highly recommend using Google Chrome if you're not already using it. The reason is that it has the most web support for any other browser that you could possibly use. The next thing we need to talk about is the screen size. So this is the screen size that will allow me to put in everything, and so you can see what we can do is we can run it, because that's what this rextester.com does, is you can write something in and then you can run it right away without having to use a third-party software or just software in general, because if you're on a Mac or PC or Linux, you can just go here, and as long as you're in Chrome, it should work out just fine. The last thing is that after teaching online for years, what I have found out that most of my students like are very short tutorials, and a lot of these tutorials are going to be really short, but they're going to have a small condensed bit of information, meaning that it's not going to be a big long tutorial where we go ahead and we play around with the code. For the most part, these tutorials will be short, and in the tutorial name, the name will be what the tutorial talks about, meaning that when you go back years later or months later, you can just search for the name of what you need to learn, and you can just watch that short tutorial. Alright, so let's get started, and I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Welcome back everyone. Alright, so before we get started here, you can see that this is, there's a little bit of code there that is set up for you. So let me go over what goes on in a C# document here, and how this rextester works to begin with. So the thing that we need to first know is that C# is mostly used on PC, although it is used in Unity development, so that is Unity 3D, it's a game engine. And one reason that C# is used in games is that Microsoft had a game programming language called XNA, which is actually pretty cool. Now, the thing is that let's just talk a little bit about programming in general, and then let's talk a little bit about C# here. Now, C# is meant to make programming a lot easier, especially programming where you program for, let's say, something like the Xbox, PC, or something like that. So the first thing, let's take a look at the top here. You see all these using statements. So using systems .collections.generic, using system, etc. What these systems do is that there are small little libraries where they have a bunch of code. If we were to delete them, the program wouldn't work, because what you end up using is there are certain libraries used for certain commands and certain functions. So, for example, this is the basic amount of commands that we need to make a program work. Now, if we had, let's say, a more complicated program, let's say an audio streaming program, we need to bring in something else, like using something that would specifically work with audio. And let's say we were to, make, a video thing we could go ahead and add in the video. So you're probably thinking, well, why don't we just go ahead and add in everything that we possibly can? Well, the reason is that, well, there's actually two reasons why. The first reason is that, you know, the more you have, the more it can, in theory, tie up resources, and you want to make your program as efficient as possible. The second thing is, and this doesn't happen all the time, but it can happen, is that the libraries do sometimes conflict. When I was making my Xbox game, if you pulled in too many libraries and then you referenced too much stuff, the program definitely crashed. All right, so the next thing that we need to take a look at is this namespace. And the thing that you need to know is that you can see that all of the system commands are in blue here. So we got a public class, a public static void, and then we have a string here. And then we have, within the quotes, it's red here. You can see that it's color-coded to make it look a lot easier. So the thing is that there are different levels of programming here. And what you need to know is that every document should look something similar to this. It should have a namespace, which is kind of the big over-encompassing method here. And you can see that there's a public class, which is the program, and you need that as well. If we were to go ahead and delete this, it wouldn't work here. Now, the one thing I should also point out is that you can see that there are these curly braces here. Most of these system programming languages need this, and you can see that this curly brace works. This curly brace ends up with this curly brace right here, and this is the entire namespace. This is the public class, and this is the public static void. So again, if we were to go and play around with this, it wouldn't exactly work here. Now, this is where you go ahead and add in your code here. So again, this is more stuff that you just kind of need. It's kind of a framework, and we shouldn't really be too concerned about this quite yet. It's just to show you how to code. At least this tutorial series is aimed at. Now you can see that there's this console.writeLine, and it says hello world. And if you push F8 or you run it, and it says hello world. Now if we go ahead and we change this here to hello world to something else, for example, you know, awesome, like this, and we run it, you can see that it just says awesome. All right, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk a little bit about this in the next tutorial. I'll see you guys then. Welcome back, everyone. All right, so let's go ahead, and what we're going to do is we're just going to add in another console.writeLine. And there's a couple things that I want to show you about this. First of all, I want to show you what the writeLine does, and second of all, I want to show you how this works. So what we're going to do is we're going to type in console, and as soon as you see this dot, what this dot does is it brings up all the properties that we can, in theory, use with console. And the reason why we can use console in the first place is because we're using one of the statements that has console. If we were to get rid of all of these using statements here, console would probably not work. So as you can see here, there's all of these different kind of properties that you can go ahead and do. And of course, if you type in the word W here, and then write, and then if we type in write line, that's the one we want here. And you can see that there's a whole bunch of these write lines here. And I know it's, if we go back all the way just back to the dot here, there's all of these different properties we can go ahead and use. Don't worry about any of this quite yet. All we're looking for here is we're just looking for writeLine. And the reason why there are so many options here is because, again, let's say you want to build a very simple application or you want to build an incredibly complicated application. Your programming language needs to be able to do both. And if you want to make really advanced applications, you do need a lot of functionality, and that's why there's a lot of them here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and type in writeLine, and then 2 brackets, and then a semicolon. Every line in C# needs a semicolon at the end, and the reason why is that when a computer compiles this, and that's what happens when we're running this, it compiles it, right? And what ends up happening here is that a computer reads each line and it executes it as it should, depending on what kind of compiler you have. So in order to make it work, you need to tell the computer to go to the next line. And in this case, it's going to be a semicolon. And that's been something that has been part of programming for a long, long time. Now, if we go ahead and push run, nothing happens because we didn't put this writeLine to do anything. Now, what ends up happening here is that when you put these 2 quotes here, ends up making what we call a string. And a string is something like characters. So you can put your name here, or you can put whatever you want. You can say, this is so awesome. And you can put really, numbers. You can put characters. You can put pretty much whatever you want in this right line here. And whenever it's in quotes, it can actually it does this. If you were to get rid of these quotes, it wouldn't work. Okay. Now another thing is if you're coming or if you remember in JavaScript, you can see that there are also these kind of quotes. In C#, you do need the double quotes. Okay. Just like that. All right. And if we go ahead and run this here, you can say this is awesome here. All right. I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Welcome back, everyone. All right, so in this tutorial, I'm going to talk a little bit about errors. So in the last tutorial, we talked a little bit about strings. Let's go ahead and let's deliberately make an error, because what ends up happening in C# is that if the compiler or the computer doesn't know what to do, then it's going to throw an error. And what I mean by that is if you just go ahead and delete these two quotes around "this is awesome," you'll see that a couple of errors comes up. So it says expected bracket, expected semicolon, and invalid expression term. So usually when I see error messages, I usually take a look at what they are, and for the most part, it's something silly, like for example, I forgot the quotes. And if you notice very carefully, the word is in blue, and what this means is that the computer thinks that the word is actually a system word. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to put the quotes in here, and then if we go ahead and run it, you can see that it works. Pretty simple, right? Now if we go ahead and we put those single quotes in here, watch what happens. Okay, we go and run it, and it sees too many characters in character literal. Now you're probably thinking, well, how am I ever going to make sense of this? And for the most part, what you need to know when it comes to errors is you need to just go back to and remember what your training is and see if it goes and works and if you've made a mistake there. A lot of these error messages sound really complicated, and you can go ahead and Google them if you really want to for a solution. All right. The other thing is that let's go ahead and let's take out this, and I'm just going to cut that with either Command or Control X, depending on if you're on a Mac or PC, and let's just paste this in here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and run it, and it says invalid token in class struct interface member declaration. And what this means is that this is in a different space, like it's not supposed to be there. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to push, I'm just going to go ahead and cut this, and then I'm going to put it in a different spot here. Okay, if we go ahead and we run this here, and it says a namespace cannot directly contain members of fields of such methods, right? And again, it's just in a different spot. So what you need to know is that the more you program, the more you find out what these error codes mean, and the more you can actually figure out what they're supposed to do. So let's go ahead and let's put that back in here, and then everything works out quite nicely. All right. So when it comes to errors, just if you keep programming and you keep finding that a certain error comes up, you'll end up finding out what that error actually does and how to fix it. And it just takes a little bit of practice. The more practice you do, the better you get. All right? I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Welcome back, everyone. All right. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at this line here. You can see that this line is first of all in green, and you can see that there's also some green text up here. All right, and so what ends up happening is that if you see these two slashes, it says your code goes here. Well, that obviously is not code, and the reason is because it's something called a comment. Now, comments come in two varieties. They come in single line comments, which you just push two slashes like this, and you can put whatever you want in here. You can say, whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. It could be gibberish. It could be whatever you want. And the reason why we put comment codes in there is let's say you have a whole bunch of code. You can say this brings up the error message, and then there'll be some kind of code down here. And then you can say something like this brings up the menu, and you can just remind yourself, right? And you can also put comments over here. So for example, you can say this writes to the screen. Okay, and sometimes comments are actually really good, because if you go for lunch, or you take a vacation, or you go out for the weekend and you come back, you don't necessarily know what's going to happen or what you might forget. So I've actually gone out for lunch and forgot what I was supposed to do after lunch. And so it's good to comment as much as you can. The next thing you can do is you can actually comment multiple lines, and the way you do that is you go slash, and then you put a star there, and you can see that the rest of these are now commented out. And the other thing is you just put a star and then a slash again. Okay, and for the most part, there's a reason why we do this. Is sometimes if you're trying to debug your work and you know that, like, for example, this block of code is giving you some problems, what you do is you go ahead and you comment out the code, and that way the compiler won't do anything about it. It will actually just it won't do anything. It will just comment it out, and it will forget about that code. So you can put in multiple lines of code. You can put in multiple comments. You know, for example, this could be a multiple line comment if you wanted to. All right, comments are really important, and I highly recommend that you use them. I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Welcome back, everyone. So in this tutorial, we're going to talk a little bit about this public static void main. Now, what this static void does is this static void is the main area in which your code is run. So you need something in here, and usually what we end up doing is we usually end up calling other voids. Now, what is this void really? Well, this void is just an area in which we can go ahead and put our code. It's just that simple. So let's go ahead and let's put in another one. We're going to go public static. We're going to say void, and we're going to just call it awesome. Okay? It does need these two brackets here, and it does need two curly braces, because what ends up happening is that the curly braces show the start and the end of this void here. Now, if we run this here, nothing ends up happening. It's exactly the same. Now, you're probably thinking, what happens if we absolutely cut this code? So I'm just going to cut this code here, and I'm going to put it in here. What happens? The answer is nothing, because we haven't actually called this void in any way, shape, or form. So the way it works is that everything goes through the main. So if you want to go ahead and call awesome, it's actually really simple. So we just type in awesome and then two brackets like this, okay? And what should end up happening is if you run it here, what it does is it calls this void here. Now, let's just go ahead and I'm going to comment this out for a second. Okay, so that means that the compiler is not going to read it, and if we run it again, nothing happens. So in a couple tutorials ago, I did tell you what ends up happening is that the computer reads it line by line, and that is absolutely true. So it's reading this line, and then the next, and then the next, and then it reads this, this, and then it reads this. And you're probably thinking, well, it should read this as well, shouldn't it, right? The answer is absolutely not, because what ends up happening is that the main, it only runs this, and then if there's nothing in here to run, then it forgets about the rest. That's what ends up happening. So we can have this one right here. We can say awesome, and we can go ahead and do that here. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to cut this out right there. So it just says awesome, and that's because it's only reading this code here. We can go ahead and we can do this again. We can declare as many of these public static voids as we can. All right, public static void, and we're going to say write to the screen. And I'm going to talk about my capitalization in just a second here. And by the way, some people and some programmers like to put their curly bracket right here. It's up to you. I don't like to do that. I like to do it like this personally, but that's just what you need to do. Now, if I go ahead and I paste this in here and we run it, it just still says awesome here. Because the reason is that we're only calling this public static void. If we want to call right to the screen, all we need to do is we need to just type in write to the screen, okay? And then we need to put a semicolon there, and we go and run this here, and then you can see that it in the public main, it reads this one, and then it reads this one. So what it does is it calls this public static void and then this public static void. That's pretty much all it does, all right? So we can go ahead and we can do this an infinite amount of times. Now you're probably also wondering why there is no semicolon right there. And the reason is that that line does not need, when you declare a void like this, you don't put a semicolon there. It's just the way it is. Now, another thing is that this stuff is absolutely case sensitive. So if I go ahead and do this here, you can see it says the name right to the screen does not exist in the current context. And you'll get this a lot because everyone makes typos. There's a very easy fix to do that. You can just go ahead and copy the name of the void by double clicking and copying it and just going ahead and pasting it. Okay? And that's an easy way to get around that problem. Now, you'll notice that what I did here is I didn't capitalize the first word, but I capitalized the rest of the words in that little area there. And the reason is that when you you can't put in spaces like this. And the reason is that the computer won't reads that space as something that it reads the space and it reads those things as different objects. So you have to put everything into one word. And the reason why we capitalize it is because it makes it look a whole bunch it makes it look a whole bunch better. All right. So make sure everything is case sensitive. And if you do this, this is probably the best practices when it comes to programming. And if you do this, it just looks a little bit better. I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Welcome back, everyone. Now, just as a kind of appendix to the last tutorial, you can actually go ahead and you can call right to the screen in this one here. You can call these voids anywhere you want. So the way this works is that it's going to read the main and it's going to call the void awesome. And it's going to put this out to the screen here. And then it's going to go ahead and it's going to then call this one here. And we can call as many of these as we want. So if we go ahead and we run this here, just like this here, you see that nothing changes. And the reason is that we called this in the second in the second void, which just simply calls it here. You can call it wherever you want. All right. So you can go ahead and these short answers, you can call it anywhere you want, but where you cannot call it is something like here. So if I go ahead and I just go ahead and put this here, you'll see if I run this, you see that it says method must not have a return type. Usually when you get that, it means it shouldn't be there. All right. So, and I'm just cutting and pasting, by the way. All right. And that's pretty much it. All right. I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Welcome back, everybody. All right. So there is one thing that we need to do that is already being done here. But I want to make sure that I highlight why it's being done. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take out all the indentation, meaning that I'm just going to go ahead and I'm just going to do this here. And you'll notice, for example, that if we were to run this, nothing would end up happening. And the reason is that the white space here actually means nothing unless you're declaring something in a void here. All right. And so I'm just going to go ahead. I'm just going to delete this. And I'll just delete that here. And as you can see, I'm not even going to, I won't even do the whole thing here. I'll just show you what the difference is between this and this, is that you can see that that is not very easy to read. And that's only something like almost 9 lines of code. Imagine if you had, 1,000 lines of code, 10,000 lines of code, it would just look like a mess. So the best practices when it comes to all of this here is to indent. So if you have a namespace or a class or even a void here, you want to indent it. And whatever you have in between here, for example, you also want to indent it. And you can just push tab to indent it like that, all right? So it's really important. The next thing here is that the white space here is that you can have as much or as little white space as you want here. This will run exactly the same, although it just doesn't look good. Okay, so that's the only difference here. And if you go ahead and rerun this, everything works out. All right, I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Welcome back, everybody. All right, so we know how to write something to the screen here, but what we need to learn how to do is we need to learn how to use something called variables. Now, variables are just simple boxes, if you will, where you can put in different kinds of information. All right, so there are different kinds of information. For example, you could have characters, or you could have some numbers. And there's different kinds of numbers, by the way. There are whole numbers, there are decimal numbers, there are negative numbers, etc. And there's also other kinds of variables, such as Boolean, which is true or false, Or if you want to get more specific, if you're into game development, you can have game objects as variables, etc. All right, so what we need to do is let's go ahead and let's declare a variable. Okay, so you need to go ahead and you need to go and put this into the public static void here. And what we're going to actually do is we're just going to get rid of this here, and we're going to put this here, and I'm just going to get rid of this here. All right, so if we go ahead and run this, it should just say awesome. All right, so we pretty much have something really simple to work with. You need to go ahead and you need to declare variables within the main here. So we're going to declare something called an integer variable, and if you remember back to math class, it's a positive or negative whole number. So what we're going to do is we're just going to type in the word numbers. So the way it works is that you, in order to declare a variable, you can say the kind of variable, in this case is an integer, and we're going to make it equal to numbers. Okay. Now, there's two ways of declaring this here. So you can declare it as int numbers, and that's simply the way it works. Or you can go ahead and you can go and what we call initialize it, meaning that it goes int numbers equals to 1. Simple enough, right? So numbers is equal to 1, and if we were to make it equal to -1, -10, but what we can't do with integers specifically is make it 10.5, because remember, it's only whole numbers. So let's just go ahead and let's just make it 1. So numbers is equal to 1 here. And let's say we want to, if we run this here, nothing ends up happening, and it's pretty simple because we haven't really told it to go and print numbers. So you might think that you go ahead and put 2 quotes in here, and you type in the word numbers here, and you go ahead and run this, and it just actually types the word numbers. And the reason is that, remember, anything in quotes will actually literally type out anything you put in it. But if you go ahead and you type in the word numbers like this, we can go ahead and run it, and of course the output is 1. And the reason why it's 1 is because numbers is equal to 1. If we change numbers to equal to 10 and we run it, guess what? It equals to 10. But if you make a spelling mistake, for example, and it's equal to number, you're going to get an error. It says the name number does not exist in correct context. And that's pretty simple because, you know, you just go ahead and you just put numbers just like that. All right. So that's how you go and you write out a number, and that's how you declare a variable. I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Welcome back, everyone. So we've gone ahead and declared one variable here, and one thing that I highly recommend that you do is you go ahead and you put a little comment beside it, and you say this is for numbers. Something like that, just to tell you and remind you what you do. And the reason for this is that when you're building an application, you don't just build 1, 2, or 10 variables. A lot of times they could be like well within to the hundreds. And depending on what kind of development you're doing, and even the smallest applications might even have 20 or 50 variables in them, all right? So let's take a look at another kind of variable, and we're going to go and we're going to call this a string variable. And then we're going to call this letters. Okay, so ints, numbers, string, letters, and we're going to go ahead and make this equal to, and we're going to go ahead and put the 2 quotes, because whenever you have a string or something like that, you need the 2 quotes. And we'll just say this as letters, and we'll go ahead and capitalize the L in it just to make sure that we know that what's going on here. So if we type in the word letters here and we run this, you can see that it just types the word letters here. Now we can go and add in numbers to that as well. Okay, and you can see that the numbers are added there. Now, I should point out at this point, when you have a string with numbers in it, it's not necessarily a real number. The int number is a real number that we can do math with. So we can add, let's say, 1, 10, or whatever to int, but we can't add strings together in C#. You can do it in JavaScript, and it kind of mashes it together and makes it work. But in this case, you can't mix ints and strings. You have to do a little bit of extra work in order to make that happen. So as you can see here, we have console.writeLine and letters, and watch this. If we go console.writeLine and we type in, you know, numbers, guess what? When we run this, it's going to equals just that. And it's just that simple. All right, I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Welcome back, everybody. All right, so let's go ahead and let's add in another variable here. So another kind of variable that you use quite a bit are something called Boolean variables, and you just need to type in bool. As you notice, if you type in Boolean, it does not work. So if you type in bool, and we're going to call this true, false, like this here. And you notice how when true is blue like this, and if we type in false, that also becomes blue, and I'll explain that in just a second here. So we're just going to type in true, false, just to make sure it works. All right, so a Boolean is either set to true or false. Okay, so let's just go ahead and set this to false here, and let's go ahead and type in true, false here. All right, and let's go ahead and run this. It says it's simply false, and if we change this to true, then we go ahead and you can see that it changes up to true. Now you'll notice that if we go ahead and capitalize this true, it gives you an error. So this true has to be false, or this true has to be capitalized, and you notice that in the output it just becomes true. So Boolean variables are actually very important. For example, a lot of times, for example, you would say is a certain device activated, for example, a USB port or something like that. Is the camera activated? Yes or no. There's a lot of times where you just have a yes or no question. Now, what some people do is they actually, true or false is either 1 or 0, false being 0, true equals 1. And if you type in int, let's say true, false, int, like this, a lot of people, what they do is they actually make a integer either 0 or 1, and which is equal to true or false. That's completely up to you if you want to do that. Some people do it. I don't do that as much, except sometimes in game engines you do need to do that. You just need to. All right, so that is the Boolean variable. I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Welcome back, everyone. Of course, you can actually do math with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have int, and then I'm going to also declare another kind of variable here. And I'm going to go to int, and I'm going to call this addition var. All right, and you can abbreviate your variable names if you want to. And I'm going to make this equal to 11. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put this in as numbers, just like this. And then the second one, I'm going to do addition var, just like that. And the third one is I'm going to do console.writeLine, just like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this here. I'm going to go numbers plus addition var. Okay, and if we go ahead and run this here, you can see that you do need a semicolon there, and you can see that it goes ahead and adds it there. Now you can go ahead and also subtract it. Okay, like this. Works out really well. You can go ahead and divide it if you want to, right? And you can see it ends up as 0, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a second. And you can also multiply it. Okay, you can do pretty much whatever you want with in math, right? Now the only other thing is that let's actually do something here. Let's change addition var to, let's say, 3. Okay, so 3 goes into 10, and if we go ahead and divide it, watch what happens. Okay, it gives a 3, but notice how it doesn't give a decimal, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the next tutorial. So the point of this tutorial was to just go ahead and do a little bit of math. All right, so you can do pretty much whatever you want when it comes to math. I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Welcome back, everybody. All right, so let's go ahead and let's talk a little bit about what we need to do in order to make decimals. So if I go ahead and I type in 3.5 here, and I go ahead and run this here, you can see that it says cannot implicitly convert type double to type int. All right, and what that means is that, remember, integers are just whole numbers. You can't have decimals. In order to make a decimal, we have to do something called a double. All right, so if we just type in the word double, and we're going to call this decimal place, like this, and you notice that when I type in decimal, it turns out to be blue, so you cannot use that word. There's something called the reserved word, and whenever you see, for example, the word decimal, you can't use that unless it's in quotes. Okay, so if you see the word double decimal place, and we'll make this equal to 3.5. Okay, and 3.5, just like this, put the semicolon there, and let's go ahead and let's just type in decimal place, like this. Okay, let's go ahead and run this. Everything should work, and it should be 3.5. Now let's go ahead, let's change this to an addition here. Okay, we'll change it to an addition, and what we'll do is we'll type in decimal place. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and run this here, and you can see that, of course, 10 plus 3.5 is equal to 13.5 here. Okay, so we can go ahead and subtract that as well. We can go ahead and run that, and we're going to go ahead and divide it. Okay, we run that here, and you can see that it works out there. Now, one thing that you're probably thinking is, why does this not throw a kind of exception here? Because we're technically adding apples and oranges here. Well, in this case, it actually works out. It actually works out where C# just kind of mashes them together. In some other environments, you can't add ints and doubles, and in other environments, they're actually called real. If you remember back to math class, they're called real as well. So double real, you can't add them together because they're two totally different things. It's like apples and oranges. But in this case, it ends up working. All right, I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Welcome back, everyone. I'm just going to go ahead and delete these two just to make it look a little bit easier. So let's say if you want a string in here, and I'm just going to use an example. Let's say you're making a game or something like that, and you wanted to have score in there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and run this, and it says simply score. Now, what happens if you wanted to have, let's change the word numbers to score. Okay, so we have int score is equal to 10. So if we wanted to type in the word score after this, and we run this, it says it doesn't quite work. But if you put the word plus in there, watch what ends up happening. So in the console.readline, you can go ahead and you can add it together. Now, that plus there is not a mathematical plus. It's more like, in addition to, in the console readline, it's set up in such a way that that plus's functionality is just simply add variables, okay? So you can go ahead and watch this here. You can go ahead and add in another plus, and you can add in another string if you want. You can say score. You can say lives or something like this, and we're going to go ahead, and it's always good to put a space, especially if you put a colon. So for example, you put what it's supposed to be on the heads up display. If you go ahead and put a space there, you can see that works here, right? Now, but there's also another problem. There is no space after the word 10. So what we have to do is we have to add in, what I like to do is I like to just add in a plus, two quotes, and a space. And that all that is it's a separator, okay? So I'm just going to go ahead and run this. And there we go, lives. And then if we change the addition bar to lives, and we can go ahead and just go ahead and add this to lives, okay? So run it there we go. So there we go, we have the output there. So as you can see, this plus has two different functions here. If we go ahead and put a negative sign in here, you can go ahead and run that. It says that operator can't be used. And that makes sense because, it's not supposed to be used that. Now remember, a plus sign or any other sign is just a symbol. And in this case, this particular symbol has two different functions. It could either be a math and use it to add numbers together, or it can be used as something in addition to write to the console. I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Welcome back, everybody. All right, so let's just do one more thing with math before we move on here. So you can actually add in variables outside of the console.writeline. So let's say we want to do score plus lives, all right? And if we go ahead and we do that here, we run it, it doesn't work because what does this mean? It's not exactly an equation. So it is like math, and you have to have an equation. Now, generally, when you add in variables, you should add the same type together. So let's go ahead and let's just add an answer here. And notice you don't have to necessarily do this here. All right, so let's just go ahead and do this, and I'll just show you what happens here. Okay, so if I go score plus lives equals answers, and I go ahead and run this, it says the left-handed side of the assignment must be a variable, property, or indexer. Okay, so first of all, you don't have to necessarily initialize this. Okay, and what this means is that this looks like a standard equation that you've seen in math class or you're used to. But what you need to do is you need to just do it the other way. Okay, and you go and run it, and then everything works out. Now, if we go ahead and I just delete all this here, put in the brackets there, and I just type in the word answer, you should see that it does work. Right, so you can see score plus lives answer, and you can also even go ahead and add even one to that here, and there we go. So you can do whatever you want, and this is the way it's supposed to be done here. Now again, what I like to do is I like to say what I'm doing here. I'm saying, this is the math we need to do, or whatever you need to, whatever comment you need to do, just because it's easy to forget, especially once the equations get more complicated than they currently are. So generally, it's good to have, if you're outputting, for example, if you're writing to a console line, to have a whole bunch of them together. Like, for example, I'll just show you what I mean. Have it more like this. And if you have a whole bunch of math, you can go ahead and add all the math together here. Now, this isn't going to work. This is just an example, by the way. So you can say math and output. There we go. Okay, that's pretty much what you should probably do. Just because you want to make your code look as easy as you possibly can. All right, I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Welcome back, everybody. All right, so let's talk a little bit about variable scope. Now, I could make a whole tutorial series on variable scope and probably talk for a bit, about an hour. But what we're going to do is just let's set up another void. Remember, these voids here are just areas where we can put code, and so we'll just make it public static, and then you have to put a void in there. Awesome. And then we'll just go ahead and add that in here. Go ahead and just delete these couple lines as well. There we go. Okay, so if I want to write in console.writeLine, okay, and I want to write line in score, okay, watch what happens. It doesn't work, and the reason is that when you actually declare this variable here, you can't view it outside of these curly brackets, meaning that these curly brackets here are where you can see the variable. So if you have and want to use it outside, you need to create a global variable. So what we do here is that there are such things as local and global variables, and there are other scopes of variables, meaning that you can actually view variables in certain situations. For the most part, what you need to be concerned with is that when you declare a variable inside a curly bracket, you need to use it within that curly bracket. As soon as you use it outside the curly bracket, it won't work. All right, I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Welcome back, everyone. All right, so what do we need to do in order to make it a global variable? Well, the way that global variables are declared within C# like this, we actually go and we make this a public constant, and what we'll do is we'll call this a public constant int, and we'll call this global score. Okay, like that. And notice how both words are capitalized, and we'll go ahead and make that equal to 0. Okay? And what we'll do is if we type in global score here, it should work. There's only one problem. We haven't actually called the public static void awesome, and we can go ahead and do that right here. So let's run it, and there we go. It's 0. Now we can go ahead and we can also declare this to 1 like that, and we run it, and guess what? It ends up being 1 here. And remember, this first console.writeLine is the answer here. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and get rid of that because I'm going to show you other cool things that you can do. Okay, I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Welcome back, everyone. All right, so one of the most important parts about this kind of programming is to be able to pass variables into these kind of functions and these voids here. So what you need to do is watch this. If you type in int a like this here, and we run it, you'll see that no overload method awesome takes in 0 arguments here. You'll see that here, what will end up happening is we need to pass this a variable, and we're going to just type in answer. Okay, so if we run it again, it all works out. But watch this. Watch this. If we go plus a, we'll add answer into that right there. So you can see that there is another way of taking something from here and putting it in here. And so it's actually really important here. So let's just go ahead. Let's just call in another public static void. Okay, and we're going to call this addition. Okay, and we'll take int a in again. And I'm going to explain this. Don't worry why I can use the exact same int a there. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead, and as you can see, if we run this here, you know, everything works out. And if we type in addition, we have to pass it a variable, okay? And what we can do is we can just pass it a, just like that. And a is going to be a here. And if we go console.writeLine, and we'll make this a, there we go. So what answer should be is score plus lives plus 1. In fact, I'm going to make this actually a lot easier. I'm just going to actually get rid of this here, just so I can make this easier and explain it. So answer is going to be equal to 3. Okay? And I'll make it 4 just because it's different. Okay? So answer is going to be equal to 4. It's going to, when main gets run, it's going to go into awesome, and awesome takes in one argument. And it is, these methods and these voids are meant to take in arguments. You can take in 1, you can take in 100, you can take in as many as you want. Just up until now, we haven't actually taken anything in. So when something is in these brackets here, it means that we need to take in this case, an integer. So when we call it, we have to pass it an integer, or else it's going to throw an exception. Okay, so we have awesome, which is going to go to answer, and then answer is going to be a. So whenever we use a within this void, it's going to be what we passed it, which was answer. So in this case, global score plus a. In this case, 1 plus 4 should equal 5. Okay, so let's just run that actually. So it should equal 5. And then when we go and we call up addition, which also takes in an int a, it will pass in this a, which will be answer. So it goes answer, and that becomes int a, and this is int a, and this int a becomes this int a, and then we go and write that out, so it should be 4. Okay. Now you're probably wondering why there's 2 int a's and why that isn't causing a problem. So normally, if I were to go and say, you know, int answer here, okay, like this, and then I would go to run it, it would say there's already a variable that's named that, all right? And you're thinking, well, why can I not do that? Well, the answer goes again back to scope. This int a has a scope of only this void, right? So we can have 100 voids with 100 int a's as long as the int a is here. But just to clarify it, and I'm going to explain this again because it took me a while to go ahead and do this here. Okay, so we have answer, which is equal to 4, and then when we call awesome, which takes an int a, we're going to pass it answer. So answer is now going to become int a, and whenever we use int a here, it's going to be 4. So we output global score just to show you how global variable works plus a, so it should equal 5. All right, and then once we call the void addition, it's going to take an int b. So int a, which was taken from here, is now passed to int b. And so anytime we are here in this void here, it will be int b. And we just write out b, which should be 4 anyway. All right, and so that is how you pass in variables. It's really important, and you use it quite a bit in programming. I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. All right, welcome back, everyone. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm just going to delete all of this here, and I'm actually going to go ahead and delete all this here, and we're going to start off with a fresh document right here. So if we run this here, everything should work. You always want to run it just to make sure everything does in fact work. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go and we're going to talk about if statements. Okay, so first of all, what we're going to do is we'll just type in int numbers is going to be equal to 1, and we're going to make int answers is going to be equal to 2. Okay, so we have 2 ints here, and there is something called an if statement, which is actually really important here. So we have numbers and we have answers, and an if statement works like this, and I'm just going to write this in pseudocode. So we have if a condition, okay, and then we have, you know, an action. That's pretty much all it is. So I'm just going to leave that up there for just a second here, and then I'm going to go and I'm going to talk a little bit about what it is. So first of all, let's type in an if statement, and you know, an if statement might look like this. If numbers is equal to 1, okay, and you need the double equal signs, all right? Now, in C#, you technically don't need curly brackets like this, okay? So, but I'm going to put them in for just a second, and I'm going to go console.writeLine, and we're going to say, we're just going to say yes, just like this, okay? We're going to run this, and then it's yes. So if numbers is equal to 1, it's yes, okay? Now, if I put in if numbers is equal to 2, it doesn't do anything because numbers is not equal to 2. Pretty simple, right? Now, technically in C#, and this is one thing I absolutely love about C#, is that you technically, if it's a one-line answer action like this, if we have like if like this in action, we can go ahead and just make it one line here. So watch this. If we go ahead and run this, it does say yes, but watch what happens if we go ahead and we put this twice here, and we make it equal to 2, it's only going to say yes once. In fact, let me just actually change that to something else, like, for example, 1, 2, 3. It's just going to post 1, 2, 3. And if I only put this as 1, it's going to put yes, then 1, 2, 3. And the reason is that there is a scope of the if statement. If we want both of these to be a part of the if statement, we have to put them in curly brackets like this, right? And if we don't do that, it's you know, for example, it won't work. It's pretty simple. And I'm just going to go ahead and delete that, and I'm going to go ahead and delete that as well. And I'll just go ahead and do that here. So if you can do this, for example, if answers is equal to 2, you can go ahead and you see it says yes, and if answers is equal to 1, then we can go ahead and it doesn't do anything. All right, I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Welcome back, everyone. All right, so let's go ahead and let's add in the next thing in an if statement, which is an else statement. Okay, so if we have if answers is equal to 2, it's going to go ahead and put console.writeLine, and it's going to say yes. And then if it is not, so console.writeLine, we're going to actually say no. Okay, so let's run this here. And so the way this works is that it checks to see if answers is equal to 2, and then it write lines yes. And you can do anything you want in this if statement. I'm just showing you how it works. And if it's not equal to 2, it's going to say no. So if answers is equal to 1, it's going to ask if it is, and if it is, it's going to say yes. If it's not, it's going to say no. So it says no. Simple enough, right? So that's an else statement here. And again, you can go ahead and you can put, let's say, numbers is equal to 1. In this case, it is. So it's going to say yes. And then if numbers is equal to 2, it's not. So it's going to say no. All right. I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Welcome back, everybody. All right, so there's another thing that we can do with if-else statements, and that's an else-if statement. And an else-if statement requires a condition. So if answers is equal to 2, then we can go ahead and we can do something here. So for example, we'll do console.writeLine, and we'll make it maybe. Something like this, okay? So if numbers is equal to 1, right, and answers is equal to 2, watch what happens. It says yes. And the reason is because it checks to see if numbers is equal to 1, and it's absolutely right. So it doesn't need to go and read the rest of this, all right? So if we change numbers to 2, it's going to read this, and it's going to say numbers is not equal to 2. So is answers equal to 2? And yes, it is, and it should say maybe, okay? And if we change this here to something that doesn't make sense or is not true, all right, you can see that it says no. It's like if both numbers and answers is not correct, then we're going to go to this else statement here, all right? Now, you can have as many of these else-if statements as you want. You can only have one if statement in an if statement. You can have as many else-ifs as you want. You can have 100, and you can only have one else. But you can have multiple if statements, meaning that what you can do is you can have multiple if statements like this, right? You can have multiple if statements as you want, but within the if statement, and by the way, the whole if statement is what I have highlighted here. So the whole if statement, you can only have one if and one else, but you can have as many else ifs as you want. All right? And remember, in pretty much every other language, you have to go ahead and put curly brackets around each if and each else. It's only in C# for now where you can, if you only have one line, you can get away with not actually putting in those curly brackets. All right? I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Welcome back, everyone. All right, so I'm going to show you something called a nested if statement, okay? So this is an if statement within an if statement, and in order to do that, we need to go ahead and we need to add in these curly brackets here. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and push return a couple times, and then you can do this an infinite amount of times. Like, you can have an if statement within an if statement within an if statement within an if statement if you really want to. But in this case, I'm just going to show you the first two levels. It's actually quite simple. So let's get rid of actually the else if and the else for now, okay? So what this will mean is that if numbers is equal to 2, and we should make that equal to 1 here, and we have if answers, and you should, by the way, not put a space in between the if and the bracket here. So if answers is equal to 2, right? And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to put this console.writeLine here. I'm just going to go ahead and delete that, and I'll just go ahead and indent it. And remember, indentation is actually quite good to have here, okay? So if we go ahead and run this here, okay, and it works out perfectly. Now, you can actually put in an else statement for this if statement here. So else, and then we'll go console.writeLine, and this will be now. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through this here, and walking through your code is actually really important. Most people don't tend to know that it's really that important, but walking through your code is actually quite important. Okay, so the first thing is that we go if numbers is equal to 1, and that is what we want. Then if answers is equal to 2, it's going to write yes. If answers does not equal 2, you're going to write no. So let's go ahead and put that to 1 here, and then the output should be no, but there is a you need to have that here. All right, and console.writeLine, and you can also see here that the capitalization didn't quite work in there. Anyway, so we have that working here, and it does say no. It's pretty simple, right? So you can also have an else if there if you really want to, but for the most part, you know, if answers is equal to 1, then no. All right. Now, if we really want to, let's just put in an else if, and then we'll go answers is equal to 2, and then we'll go console.writeLine, okay, and we'll say maybe, okay. We'll run it, and then we also need that semicolon there, and we'll go ahead and it says maybe, and that's exactly what it's supposed to do. All right, I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Welcome back, everybody. All right, so let's go ahead and let's find, and I'm going to show you how to do a for loop within C#. So a for loop is a loop that keeps on going for a certain amount of time. So for example, sometimes if you need to spit out a whole bunch of numbers, this is probably the best thing to do. So it's very simple. It's for int I, and you can make this whatever variable you want, but in for loops all over, everyone seems to do I, and that's just kind of the way it is. And you do need a semicolon here, and this is kind of weird, but this is just the way a for loop is. And then I is greater than or less than or equal to, let's say 3. Okay, so it's going to do it 3 times, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this in a second here. And then semicolon, then we go I plus plus, and I'm actually showing you quite a bit of stuff in this one small tutorial. And we're going to go ahead and put the curly brackets in here, and we're going to go console.writeLine, and then we're going to say, we're going to output I, but let's say this is colon space, the quotes plus I, okay? Semicolon there, and let's run this here. And then you can say, it says this is 1, 2, 3, etc., okay? And if we change this to, let's say, 10, it will spit it out 10 times. Okay, there we go. Kind of cool, right? So let's go over this. First of all, we have the for loop, and what it does is it just keeps on going. It just essentially keeps on going until this number here. So we got I is equal to 1, so we initialize I. The second thing is that's how long do you want it to go for? Do you want it to go for 9 times, 100 times, 2 times, whatever? Let's just go to 6 times here, and we'll go to run this, okay, and it'll go to 6 times, and then I plus plus. Whenever you see a plus plus, that means you're simply adding to it. So the way this works is that in this case, the first loop, in fact, let's just actually make this 3 times because it's going to be a lot easier to understand, and it'll be a little bit easier for me to explain. So the first time it goes, I is equal to 1, all right, and then it prints out I, which is 1, and then it loops again, and then I is then, because of this here, I is equal to 2, and then I becomes 2, and then I is equal to 3, and since this is a less than or equal to 3, by the way, what ends up happening is that that's the last time, and then it just spits it out of the for loop, and you exit out. So it goes once through it, twice through it, and then 3 times through it, and this 3 times is dictated by this number here, and then it just simply ends it. All right. So that's essentially what a for loop is. All right. I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Welcome back, everyone. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and I'm just going to delete this here, and I'm going to show you one more thing, and we're just going to put in an if statement, and we're going to go if numbers is double equal to answers, okay, and we're going to go console.writeLine, and then we're just going to simply go yes, okay. So if we run this here, nothing happens because numbers does not equal answers, okay? But you can also have a number of different what we call operators. You can have, if numbers is less than or equal to answers, in this case it is, then it's going to put yes, okay? And let's just put in an else statement here. So if numbers is whatever operator we put in here is going to either be the opposite of what happens. So we'll go console.writeLine, write line like that, and we'll put no, just like that. Run this, and then so yes, it is less than equal to. You can also have greater than or equal to, and if we run this, it should equal to no. Now, if you're coming from JavaScript, there is actually 3 different kinds of equals. It doesn't exactly work like that. There's also not equals. Okay. So does numbers not equal answers? And the answer is yes, it doesn't equal, right? So there's a whole bunch of options we can do there. All right. I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Welcome, everybody. Well, that concludes the course. It has been an hour of instruction, and I hope you've learned a lot from it. So one thing I want you to do is I want you to play around with all of the concepts that I've shown you in this tutorial series. The best programmers actually go ahead, and what they do is they sandbox and they play around and they prototype with all the code that they have. And I do this a lot too. I have hundreds of prototypes on my computer, and I have to say that I would not be the developer I am today if I didn't do all those prototypes. So the more you code, the better you get. It's something that's actually quite simple, and I highly recommend that you do it. So where do we go from here? Well, I have a whole bunch of other 1-hour tutorial series on a variety of different topics. If you want a deal on any of these courses, you can just email me at mammothinteract@gmail.com, and you can go ahead and once you do that, I will give you a deal into my courses. I also have a lot of other courses that teach you, how to release apps to the App Store without programming, etc. So I hope you enjoyed the course, and I hope you take more courses. I do have fantastic deals for the students who have already taken my course. I'll see you guys in the next course.